Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our final day of TED Talks. At this time, we'd ask you to check to make sure your phones are set to silence. Our first speaker this morning is the founder and chairman of DCM Associates Incorporated, a nationally recognized executive search firm for executive nonprofit leadership and the Center for Nonprofit Leadership and Board Performance. He has more than 35 years of experience working with nonprofit board leadership and chief executives across the country. He is also an expert in board governance, leadership development, philanthropy, and succession planning. He's the former president and CEO of Somerset Medical Center and Foundation in New Jersey, and his journey to get there is truly a remarkable one that makes the distance from bottom to the top. A published author, he has never met a conversation he didn't love to have, especially when it's a conversation encouraging others to make their journey from hopelessness and failure to happiness and success. Please welcome to the stage Dennis Miller and his talk, From Mopping Floors to CEO.
Have you ever kept a secret? By show of hands, how many of you feel you can keep a secret for quite a while? You know, the average man and woman research can keep a secret no more than 2 or 3 hours. How about if I tell you I kept a secret for over 65 years? I never told a friend, a classmate, until I decided to write my story in my autobiography, which is Moppin Floors to CEO, from hopelessness and failure to happiness and success, my true life story. I was the middle child. How many middle child do we have out there? Anybody middle child? There we go. Come on up here and join me so I feel more comfortable. People need seats, so if you're middle child, come up here. I grew up, and the secret I kept for all that time, with the exception of telling my wife, was the abuse and trauma I suffered at the hands of my dad, both emotionally and physically. I learned later on in life that my dad had a personality disorder, gender identity issues, serious emotional instability, and constant outbursts of anger and rage. I remember when I was a boy and my dad didn't like what my mom made for dinner. He literally took the plate and food and threw it on the floor. Humiliated my mom. I chased my father around the house often with a butter knife. I'm surprised it did not end up as a juvenile justice statistic. He was so fixated on the house being beautiful that I remember my mother saying, "Boys, don't forget, it's 5 o'clock. Your father's coming home. He doesn't want you playing on the grass. Finish your game out in the street." "Sure, Mom." Christmas time, for most of this joyful time. Now, my mom was a wonderful person. She too was traumatized by him, became clinically depressed, withdrawn, and sad. So she wasn't there for me either, unfortunately. But I remember Christmas time, she always made it bright. Gifts galore, even if they had no money. And I remember one day, she gave a gift to my dad, and he said, "If this is what I think it is, someone's going to get a punch in the mouth." I wasn't aware of the trauma at the time, the abuse. It was a very devastating situation. That type of impact had a big impact upon me academically. I repeated 5th grade, not only because I liked the teacher so much, but they told me I was too emotionally immature to move on. When I was in 7th grade at a Catholic school, my teacher made me carry my desk and my books down 1 flight of stairs and put it in the closet, and I was told to teach myself. I'll never forget when the secretary came and put the light on, she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." That was my last day at that school. Even when I went to public school, I still had difficulty behaving. Now, in 8th grade, one of the things great about 8th grade was the Beatles came out on Ed Sullivan. Remember the Beatles coming out on Ed Sullivan? Huh? I love you. Come on, she loves you. What an amazing time. I couldn't believe it. And you see, we all had the velvet jackets, the Beatles stuff. It was amazing. Look at the hairdos on the girls. Remember those hairdos? I graduated. But I always remember the fact that Mr. Brown, my 8th grade teacher, came to my house one day to find out what was going on with this young boy who had difficulty behaving and could not do well academically. Now, I never knew the result of that conversation, but I looked back years ago and said, geez, that was a man that really cared. And I wish I had the opportunity to thank him. I went on to high school, and one of the things I did achieve in high school was I had a dream of playing football, and I'm number 44 there. You can still see the young and athletic figure that I possess. Are you laughing at the other picture? I wasn't sure what you're laughing at. But I love football, still do love football. You can see that that was me actually, believe it or not, I had hair back on my head back then. I did have the lead in the play. My homeroom teacher asked me to be the MC at the school's variety show because he knew I had a good sense of humor, which I do. But the humor was masking a deep emotional pain. When it came time to apply to college, I got rejected by every college I applied to. Some I got the letter, "Dear Dennis, please take us off the mailing list for next year too." It was devastating, humiliating. At no college. I was allowed to go to county college. It was a new system in our state. Went to county college. I did fairly well. But I was around 20 years old. I just, turmoil in the country. I just was distraught, depressed, anxious. I really asked myself, how do you get to be 40? How do you grow up? I didn't know. When I was 20 years old, I begged my parents to take me to a private psychiatric hospital because I was so despondent, so despairing. One of the great things about that experience was the priest from the local parish that I never met, named Father Gantley, came to visit me. And I remember he had this calm demeanor. And I wasn't used to a man with a calm demeanor and a really outgoing, positive personality. And I remember he said, "Dennis, when you get out, come see me." It's like, "Sure, Father." Like, yeah, right? I was discharged about 4 or 5 weeks out of the adolescent unit, no aftercare, same feeling, desperate, despondent, no connection to life. Where do I go? One day, just happened, decided to ride to the rectory and knocked on the door. First time in my life, I was 21. I cried my eyes out. Felt like hours. He held my hand, reassured me that everything would be fine. For months, I used to ring the doorbell, throw pebbles at the window of the rectory, or sit in front of the church, hope he came home. After about 4 or 5 months, he got me into a day hospital program that many of you run. So the first time in my life, I was 21, I had structure. 9 to 3, 5 days a week. I felt so welcomed. I felt so liked. I began to like myself. I developed a voracious appetite to read and to learn. This is pre-Kindle. By the way, my books are on Kindle and Barnes & Noble, but that's another thing. Just joking. I would devour, really, 3 or 5 books at a time. I couldn't believe it. I had this appetite to learn. Great men and women of the world, history, religion, philosophy, everything. My favorite book back then was The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm, a German psychoanalyst. It was just my Bible. I loved it. And I began to realize, oh my God, what amazing how life can be. I wanted to have a good life. Upon graduating from the program, being discharged 7 months later, whatever it was, I took a lot of odd jobs, cleaning backyards, installing carpet, anything I could get my hands on. But I did have a separation problem. I still was living home. I didn't want to be there, but I was afraid to be alone. Oh, okay. One day I was 24 years old. My father just threw me out of the house again. Enough of you, get out. Okay. I was able to call a friend, and he said, "Mom, we'll let you live here for one night only." I don't have the resources. The next day, I got a room at the YMCA in a neighboring town. I got a job as a houseman at a hotel. I thought a houseman was the guy with the gold trim, like in Jackie Gleason, The Honeymooners, bringing the luggage in, getting tips. And the man asked me, he goes, do you know how to use a mop? Sure. Vacuum, got it. So for a year, I became the houseman, cleaning the bathrooms, the lobby, and delivering the linen to the maids every day for a year. I was humiliated, though, would not go to my 5th high school reunion, of course. Hey, Dennis, was that you cleaning the urinal in the men's room? No, not me. And one day, and I just dreamed still about, I never gave up hope to have a good life. And finally, I said to myself, Dennis, be real. I said, if you don't get an education, I go anywhere. I said, how am I going to get education? I got rejected by all these schools. I said, you're going to write a letter to every school where I grew up in New Jersey and write to the president, every public school, state school. I get into every school, and I graduated tops of my class. I actually graduated Phi Beta Kappa. Now, my wife's nickname for me is Phi Beta. Like, hey, Phi Beta, did you leave the car keys in the motel room again? Hey, Phi Beta, didn't I teach you how to use remote control last week? But now I got ambitious. And I said, I want to go to graduate school. I want to get and work in health administration. I had no idea what I would eventually become. I thought I was going to be running a community health center. I wanted to give back to others. The day I got this thick letter from Columbia University School of Public Health, it was like, it's thick. Right? I'm used to those rejection letters, like, Dear Dennis, right? You crazy applying to the school? You're accepted. The Columbia University School of Public Health at the Medical Center campus. It's amazing. Great time. Graduated with honors. My first job was at a large medical center in New York City. And one day, I knew that my career was going in the right direction, but I had to invest in my emotional life. I had a big wall up. Not this wall, but the other wall I had up. And when I would date people, once they wanted me to meet their friends, I kind of fright. I ran away. I just wasn't ready to open myself up yet. But then I got into psychotherapy. Now, I won't go into detail. I spent 10 years in psychotherapy, 10 years on analysis. We'll get to that a little bit later. But one day, I was ready to relationship, so I asked the VP of nursing, Betty, when am I going to meet your nursing managers I do the budgets for? She said, next Tuesday, December 20th, we're going to have a Christmas party. Bring a $5 grab bag gift. I said, sure. Now, I knew nothing about the arts, but I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art to buy a book. And I bought a book about a French impressionist, and I thought his name was Moppin. As they were opening up the gifts, people said, what, this? I've been a fan of Moppin my whole life. They said, you mean Monet? I said, oh, exactly what I meant. I was stuttering here, Monet. True story. I met my wife that night. She's standing right here, married 41 years and 2 months. Glad? Met her in December, engaged in March, married in June. Look at that, huh? Married in UN Chapel, New York City. I remember going for pictures in Central Park. Everybody saying, don't do it. I said, too late. Ten years after I was cleaning floors, I became the CFO at a community hospital near my home. 3 years later, I became the youngest CEO in New Jersey medical center history at the age of 37, became a CEO of a large Catholic medical center. I look back, I said, what the hell did I know when I was 37? But a lot more than I knew when I'm 72, right? I went to the corporate world and had a wonderful 7-year career in the corporate world, running a healthcare practice. We had the top 6 floors in the World Trade Center. In 1999, it was after my 7th year, I said, I did well, but I was missing the family I got from the medical center. There was a sense of family. You know, when you go to work, sometimes it's a sense of family, right? Little family. So I kind of threw my hat in the ring and became the president and CEO of another medical center foundation. And I remember about 9/11, how traumatic for all of us around the world and us as Americans, and how it impacted me because all the friends I lost and colleagues that day. This was a picture of my wife and our 2 kids when on vacation in Hawaii when my sons were 15 and 12. Today, I'm so happy. My kids have turned out fabulous. One was a young teenage songwriter, lead guitarist for a famous punk rock band that toured the world. Today, he's a very successful real estate agent in Los Angeles, but I'm most proud of him. He's a fabulous father for his son, my grandson, Gavin. I love Gavin. Doug was 12. Back then, you're going to see Doug a little bit in a second here. Doug was always a phenomenal athlete. You'll see a little bit later how his body looks just like mine. As I moved on with my life, I forgave my parents. I learned not only to love myself and love others, but I forgave. He wasn't doing anything consciously. He had difficult upbringing. Before he passed away, he told my wife, I wish I could have told my wife I loved her and my kids, but I didn't know how. It's fine. But I'm glad the fact that he got to enjoy being a grandparent, and my mom got to be a grandparent. Now, I've been fortunate, lots of ups and downs in life, but I took over the sleeping hospital and made it into one of the most prestigious in the state. We had, when I got there, we were in the 9th percentile of patient satisfaction, meaning 9th from the bottom, not the top. I committed a goal to be in the top 25% in 2 years. Became the top 1% of patient satisfaction in the United States. But I did that by realizing I had to address employee satisfaction. I decided that I was going to meet as many employees as I can in our boardroom. It became dialogue with the president, not lunch with the president, because we couldn't afford lunch. We were losing money my first year. But I learned so much. I had the opportunity to grow the hospital tremendously, win all kind of awards. But I realized, when they make you businessman of the year, CEO of the year, healthcare leader of the year, I know it ain't about me. The first one I did, it's about me. I realized it's about the money we're going to give to be a sponsor. I got it. About 4 years into my tenure, the hospital was on an amazing route, a $100 million expansion program. We raised $30 million in a capital campaign. It was amazing. Dream job. My chief medical officer came to me, Dr. Bill Kors, and chief of quality assurance, Mary Lund, said to me, Dennis, we have 2 unexplained deaths that are suspicious. Not being a clinician, I was like, what do you mean? Well, there was some kind of a green tea by the table side, sent to the Poison Control Center. We don't know. I said, Bill, then you got to call the Department of Health and report this. I'm not sure the timeline, in a few weeks or a month or so, there was 3, 4, 5 unexplained deaths. Hit the national papers. One morning I woke up and we had 100 reporters at the hospital. LA Times, New York Times, CNN, everybody. All the people I saw on TV were all there. Our board hired an investigative team, came in to the hospital, met with nurses and doctors and lab people and pharmacists, and they found that there was one nurse that ordered and canceled a lot of things on a Pyxis system, if you're not familiar with hospital, a nighttime medication cart. And they gave his name to the prosecutor, who said within a day, your nurse, this nurse, has been investigated for murder at 2 hospitals in Pennsylvania. I said, what? Yeah, and 3 hospitals in New Jersey. I said, how is that possible? We contacted licensing board, clean bill of health, called the hospitals for references, good standing. I couldn't believe it. I took on the mission to change that. I remember going on Today's Show with Katie Couric to talk about we have to change this law. That same night, I was interviewed by Wolf Blitzer on CNN. When they asked me, you're going to be interviewed by Wolf Blitzer, I said, isn't it the same guy that did Ronald Reagan? 60 Minutes. We changed the law. Today, if you are a licensed healthcare professional and have been investigated for a felony, it reports to your licensing board. That's all changed now. It wore me out. About a year after that, I realized it was time for me to just kind of move on. I resigned, worked the deal out. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Built a beautiful cancer center. A woman from the American Cancer Society said to me one day, she goes, how'd you build your board? And how'd you raise all the money? How'd you build leadership here? How'd you do this? And I spent about an hour and a half in her office, just sort of like this here. Well, not exactly like this, but you know what I mean. And I went outside, a true story, it was like another divine intervention. I said, I'm going to commit my life to helping nonprofit organizations become more successful for those they serve. That was 17 years ago before I started my company. So there's some lessons in life that I've learned that I want to share with you, 10. The first one was I realized you have to accept responsibility for yourself. I could have gone through life, or you can go through life, blaming others for your failures, but only when you begin to accept responsibility for yourself and move forward with a positive plan. Makes sense. You have to have a plan, a vision for your life, and a plan to get there. I learned that perseverance is a persistent course of action despite disappointment, obstacles, and discouragement. Oh, I've had a lot of discouragement. Every time I got knocked down, though, I got back up. And I got knocked down, I got back up again. I think I lost my hair about the third time I got knocked down. I realize you have to be determined to succeed. Wanting to change your life and actually changing your life are two different things. I was determined to change my life. I learned through many times in therapy that depression was not a character flaw. I was embarrassed that I was depressed. I was terrified that someone at Prison Hospital would find me either in a therapy session or an analysis chair or couch. I did learn, to all people like yourselves, that depression was a result of my life trauma and biochemistry in the brain. I learned that depression can be treated successfully with medication and talk therapy. There was two things I never forget that the insights that my analyst gave me. One day I walked into the session, it was always like on a Friday afternoon, and he said, Dennis, it's okay to need me. I said, it is? He says, yes. He said, you never had any parenting. You never had anybody who supports you. I'm like, it's okay that I feel so needy. Here I am, a 50-some-year-old adult, president of a major medical center, all that stuff that comes with it. Wow. I began to accept that it was okay to need him. First time. And I'll never forget one day, my wife and I used to go travel out. We used to go to Aruba. Have you been to Aruba? It's one of the best places to go on vacation. Have you been to Aruba? Jeannie Campbell is buying a plane. We're all going to Aruba tomorrow, so we'll meet you out front. So I sat on the beach and I realized I'm so excited when we get there and I'm like depressed. I called my analyst up. He says, Dennis. He says, children like you who never had a relationship with a parent, identify with them. That's your way of loving your parents. It's your way of loving your mother. He says, you're not going to hurt your mother by being happy. Am I not? He goes, no. I'm not. It's like, okay to be happy because, yeah, you're not going to hurt your mother. Yeah, that's your way of loving your mother. It was amazing. Just like that. I learned that you have to, the biblical term, love thy neighbor as thyself. You can't love your neighbor until you love and accept yourself. That's what I had to learn. It was okay to be me. Once I learned to be okay to be me, that I was okay that I wasn't the failure that I was told I was, that I really actually was a really good guy, things changed in my life. I realized that self-love and selfishness are not identical, they're the opposite. I learned for me to become a loving person to others, I had to become a loving person to myself. EQ is okay. I can tell you I have a low IQ. How do I know that? When I watch Jeopardy with my wife, I lose all the time unless it's cities and sports. But seriously, I learned to become emotionally intelligent. It helped me better my life relationships, my work, my career, my personal goals. I learned in our country, we have this culture of discussions about success and failure, two dynamic, different terms. Achieve success and avoid failure. I disagree. Failure is a good thing. It's how you learn. It's amazing how we put together failure. When little boys and girls are growing up, right, they're crawling on the legs and they stand up and they fall down. Is that failure? No. Failure is a good thing. We learn from failure. I learned from failure. We have to stop thinking about failure as a negative. And success, I'm sure like you, I've met a lot of people who are successful who are not happy. I've rarely met a happy person who's not successful in some form. Never lose faith in yourself. Never lose faith in yourself, despite how tough times they were. I realized that the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people isn't their intelligence. You look at me. That wasn't that funny. It's not opportunity. It's not resources. Successful people believe that they can make their goals happen. They're determined. True. Mentors matter. Just the fact that I eventually had a friend, someone I trusted, in Father Gantley. Met the love of my life, Gladys. We call her G-Lo, by the way. True story. My son was in his band. I don't want to go into it all, but he met J-Lo and her mother at a big party. He come home, Mom, I met J-Lo. She's from the Bronx. She goes, she's from the Bronx. That's good. They got J-Lo. We got G-Lo. She says, don't call me that. 25 years later, she's G-Lo, Dr. G, whatever you want to call her, she's G. Or, more importantly, don't mess with the G. Or clearly, don't pass the G off. But no man or woman can be an island, can't be alone. So whether it's your own life or a friend of a loved one, make sure there's some sense of connection. That's what it's about, right? Connection. Is that right? Self-confidence was the key. If I went from failing every course in grammar school and high school, I learned every small achievement led for me small incremental self-confidence. Each self-confidence led me to take a little more achievement. A little more achievement led to greater self-confidence. One step at a time. It was remarkable how self-confidence was the key to success, not anything else. Self-confidence. Who am I? Who was I? I said, most times we define ourselves by our title, our income, our possessions. I had all that, still do. Wasn't who I was. I realized who I was how I behaved. I realized it was not based upon my possessions, the size of my 6-bedroom home and things like that. It was how I felt inside and how I treated my wife, my kids, my friends. We're not based upon our possessions and title and external things. It's how we are to each other. I want to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for not only being at NACOM today, but for what you do to help everybody with mental well-being. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. One more lesson I want to go over, just one more lesson. I know you're thinking about the resemblance. That actually is my younger son. That's Doug, the one that was 12 in Hawaii. So one day, we had a conversation, father and son, advice, and I told him, He asked me about his life and goals. I said, Doug, listen, if you work hard, really hard, you too can have a body like mine. Thank you all very much.